Well, good morning. Good morning. I hope you're doing well. I miss you. I keep hearing rumblings that things are going to change. If all the right parameters are met, we may be on the verge of going to phase one in this pandemic process of returning back to normal. We have been talking about grief. We've been talking about this idea of loss that we all have experienced in different degrees, but the mysterious thing that I've noticed after 2.5 decades of ministry is that people process grief differently. And last week we talked about the typical first stage of shock, of not even believing that it's happening. Today we're going to talk about sorrow. Sorrow. I just want to remind you of what the definition of sorrow is, or sadness. Sadness is this feeling of deep distress, agony caused by loss. It could be as simple as disappointment or misfortune that has caused tragedy. But the point is, there's agony attached to it. Now, something I'd like for us to kind of point out at the offset is grief is part of life. It's unavoidable. Now follow me here. But sorrow is a choice. Sorrow is a choice. And the reason I say that, and that's been something that I have seen over the years, and I've even done it myself, I've chosen not to be sad. I think part of that was my upbringing. It was really an attitude of big boys don't cry. You know, somebody gets hurt, and the first thing that I remember Dad saying is, "Don't cry." We're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but why? Why do we hear that growing up, and then we probably do the same thing with our kids? Why not? Something hurts. I remember the first time, I'll say, I was in emotional agony. It was when I was probably 5 years old. We had a dog named Pug. Little mutt, but she was just as good as gold. And she went everywhere with us. We slept with her. We'd fight over who get to sleep with Pug. And then one day she went missing. She's gone. That was unusual because she loved to eat. Pug loved to eat, so she'd always come home. She'd always make her way home. We could always expect Pug to come home. One night Pug didn't come home. And I remember not feeling good about it. 5 years old. Woke up the next morning and Dad told me that they found Pug. She had been hit by a car and crawled up into the yard and laid down and died. Man, I was broken. I was shattered. In fact, I think it was then that maybe my first communication with God began. God, if you are God, bring my dog back to life. I remember saying that. If you are God. That's kind of a bold prayer, I guess, for a 5-year-old. I don't have to tell you, our dog didn't make it. Our little pug died, and it's interesting. I go through agony every time I lose a dog. Probably you can relate. Whether it's losing a job or an investment or a friend. Loss is a big deal. But like I said, we choose how we handle that. Again, growing up, that was Dad's attitude. It was just, you just keep going. That was his generation. You can probably relate. It was your generation too. You just keep going. Try to put it out of your head. Well, the truth is that is an option to not be sad, not be sorrowful. And the truth is, I think for us guys, we have been told, you just put your guts back in your belly and you just keep going. That's how John Wayne did it, right? John Wayne didn't cry. He just kept going. I want to tell you, there's two options to this idea of sorrow. If we don't deal with it now, if we don't deal with sorrow now, it's going to affect us later on. Unresolved sorrow will affect us. I think that one thing that we just need to keep in mind in this first example is it is a choice to be sorrowful. My suggestion right now is deal with it, accept it, soak it in, and admit that things hurt, that you're sad. It's healthy. And that's the second point. Second thing we've learned in ministry and in counseling and with psychologists is that healthy sorrow is healthy. Would you admit that Jesus was perfect? That everything he did was perfect. In fact, the Bible tells us that he was without sin. So if he did something, said something, reacted a certain way, he is our model. Listen to this. John 11:33 and 36. When Jesus saw Lazarus dead and Lazarus' sister sobbing, and he saw how everybody else around there was crying, his heart was touched and he was deeply moved. Then Jesus started crying. See how much he loved Lazarus, they said. I think we should take from that sorrow is a healthy thing. It's a good thing. Let me read that again. When Jesus saw Lazarus' sister sobbing, and he saw how all those with her were crying also. His heart was touched, and he was deeply moved. Then Jesus started crying. See how much he loved Lazarus. Now, I say it's healthy. What proof do I have that it's healthy? Well, I got to tell you, I've done a little research on this concept of sorrow, because I agree. I have chosen in the past to put off, deny sorrow, because I thought that was a manly thing to do. But then I see this example of Jesus, and I did a little research on this concept of crying. Neuroscientists tell us that there are aspects of our body makeup that encourage us to have healthy cries. Dr. William Fry wrote a book on crying. He says, The Mystery of Tears. He says, number one, it relieves stress. It relieves stress. It seems embarrassing, but there is something about that just seems to allow our emotions to dissipate, to move out of us into our environment. It's releasing us. Number two, crying lowers blood pressure. It sounds like the stress and blood pressure are on the same page, but it's two separate studies that they've done. Literally, they can determine that crying lowers blood pressure. Now, this was interesting. Tears remove toxins. Dr. Fry says tears help humans eliminate stress hormones like cortisol that build up during times of emotional turmoil and can wreak havoc on the body. Did you know that you have toxins in your body that can literally be moved out of your body onto your cheeks when you cry? Removing unhealthy toxins. Number four, it reduces manganese. Now, I didn't see this one coming. The simple act of crying also reduces the body's manganese level, a mineral which affects mood and is found in significantly greater concentrations in tears than in blood serum. Manganese can cause anxiety, irritability, and aggression. Get that manganese out. And you can do that with a healthy cry. And number five, it helps you embrace your emotions and humanity. Tears actually advertise that you have a heart, that you're human. We just heard that Jesus himself, who was God in the flesh, cried. That's pretty good company. We're advertising that we are human. Crying helps us acknowledge these feelings that we're experiencing. It communicates the strength and nature of relationships. It tells someone else that, you know what, I do care. I counseled a lady one time who didn't know how to cry. She had always been told to shut up and stop crying. And a lot of people wonder why that is. Why would someone encourage repressing tears? Well, there's a couple thoughts on that. One is, and this is embarrassing to say, but that the adult is embarrassed because their child is crying. They don't want others to know that their child is crying and making a lot of noise and making a commotion. So by telling this child to repress her tears and her emotions, the adult was just being selfish. Don't cry, you're embarrassing me. Or there's another thought. A parent telling a kid not to cry and repressing these emotions, it could be that they're hoping that if they don't cry, maybe the hurt will go away. The truth is, somebody is hurt, whether physically or emotionally. For a parent to say, don't do that, it's almost like saying, I don't care about your hurt. I don't believe it. It's not that bad. So repression is not good. I encourage you to cry. And I encourage us to let our kids and our grandchildren cry. There's a couple thoughts on that, but I think that helps us to understand that there is a built-in component that God has given us, that it's okay to cry. It's good for us. It's healthy. Number 3 is that God grieves and is sorrowful with us. Listen to this. Did you know that God shares that emotion with us? This sorrow, sadness, grief. Genesis 6:6, it says it this way: the Lord was sorry that he had made man on earth, and he was grieved in his heart. Wow. Genesis 6, all the way back to the flood. God is grieved in his heart that he had made man, because they had disobeyed him, they'd moved against him, they disregarded him. Our ability to grieve makes us different than the animals, according to scientists. Typically, animals are not scientifically able to grieve. Now, will they react in a adverse situation? Yeah. I'm just telling you what scientists say. That was hard for me to believe, but that's what makes us different than animals. Can they be in pain? Yes. But emotionally, scientists say that's this sorrow is something that humans share, not animals. Cows don't grieve. Worms don't grieve. Birds don't grieve. I am an animal lover, but I also know that I am different than a cow. And God is telling us this is an emotion that he has and that we have, and that he is sorrowful and sad with us. Listen to this. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. He's not sitting on the sidelines watching pain envelop us. Listen to this verse again. Psalm 34:18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. Now, some of you may be crushed today. You may be sad. Maybe this message is hitting you just at the right time. What we're learning is it's natural. It's part of being human, and it is not something that is okay to repress. It's okay to cry. In fact, it's healthy, and God tells us he is with us. That'd be a good verse to memorize. Psalm 34:18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. Maybe that's a place where you are right now. Maybe you are crushed. Maybe your spirit feels like we're never going to get out of this pandemic. It's always going to be like this. It's stealing my life from me. I'm not going to see my kids, my grandkids, my great grandkids. I'm never going to have control again in my life. I'm never going to have freedom. My 401k is never going to be revived. I get it. I understand all that. And yet, it's part of our story. It's who we are now. And God is saying it's okay to be sad about it. And He is with us. He's not abandoned us. Now, this next section is something that requires some creativity. We talked a little bit about this last week. This idea of being in community. Now, some of us have a spouse that lives with us. Some of us has a boyfriend, a girlfriend, somebody very significant in our community. Some of us have a brother or a sister that lives with us, or that we're able to connect with on a more intimate level. I am convinced that grief is healed in community. Even in the beginning, in the garden, God says this: it is not good for mankind to be alone. It is not good, even in the garden, when everything is perfect. Before there was sin, God said it is not good for man to be alone. Now, we've talked a little bit about this idea of introverts and extroverts, and there's some people who enjoy being alone, and I get that. Then there's people who are energized by people. But the truth is, most of us are not monks. Most of us enjoy the energy, the excitement, the challenge of being with other people. And research tells us that there's something very powerful about dealing with sorrow, but doing it in community. Now, when I said be creative, I have mentioned this almost every opportunity we can when we get together. You all have one of these books. It is been one of my best friends since I've come down here, and I got to tell you, I got scratchings in here, notes. I got numbers circled. I got nicknames on here. I've got dates. Do you? I want to encourage you to get your book out. I'm trying to find the cover of the book. Here it is. Like that. Do you have your directory? I want to encourage you to call somebody. Do you have relationships outside your apartment? I hope so. Because I am convinced, until we can gather together again in our Bible studies, or hopefully small groups down the road, that we can connect over the telephone. Some folks are connecting with their iPhones. I know I've been talking to Rhonda and her grandchildren. It's kind of amazing. I got to tell you, it reminds me of growing up and watching Dick Tracy. You remember Dick Tracy talking to people on his watch, and he could see their face? That's where we are. But God tells us that we are to carry each other's burdens. And in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. Carry each other's burdens. That's That's a big deal. It says you will fulfill the law of Christ when we carry each other's burdens. That is done in the midst of a relationship. Who is it that you can call and encourage them to be real, to share their burdens? Fulfilling the law of Christ as he carried our burdens on that old rugged cross 2,000 years ago. He carried our burdens, and we can do that with others by listening to other people's story. Romans 12:15 says it this way: when others are happy, be happy with them. If they're sad, share their sorrow. Share their sorrow. It's good to laugh with people, but it's also good to carry their burdens and share their sorrow. The fifth thing that I've learned is an observation over 2.5 decades is that sorrow takes time to heal. Sorrow takes time. Even when we are sorrowful in a healthy way, it takes time. Listen to this, Ecclesiastes 3:1-4. There is a time for everything. There is a season for every activity under heaven. A time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance. There is a season for everything. And I think about these opposites. We have good days, we have bad days. We have up days and we have down days. There's a time to weep, there's a time to rejoice. There's a time to be sad, a time to mourn. There's a time to dance and a time to reflect. You know, I think about people that I have counseled in the past who have lost a child, and they are 10, 20, 30 years after losing their child. They don't want to forget the child and pretend like the child didn't work or didn't live. No, that child was part of their life. In some ways, they're still mourning, but they're healing. But the truth is, the child was part of their story, part of their life. Are they still sad? I think, yeah. What I found is that folks who are healing from that trauma are still dealing with it, but it doesn't consume them anymore, not like it did. It takes time. Sometimes it takes a whole lifetime. But there is a time for it. I like this idea of a season that it's part of who we are. It's a period of time, and it's different for different people. But it's part of who we are. And just to kind of keep in mind, we want to keep this idea of sorrow in front of us. What we're going through here, I believe with all my heart, this is not the worst thing that's going to happen to us in our lifetime. But is it worthy of tears? Is it worthy of recognizing that we're sad? Just in the last couple of days, I've heard people say how sad that they are that they can't get outside. Some folks literally cannot go outside. And they're broken. It's okay to be sad. It's part of the healing process. I just want to remind you that this idea of sadness is part of who we are. It's healthy. Don't repress it, because it eventually will come back to haunt you later on. It will affect relationships. And God is with us. He tells us over and over and over throughout the Bible, I am with you. I am with you. I will never leave you or forsake you. My question to you this morning is, how's your heart? How's your heart right now? Are you broken? Are you sad? It's okay to admit it, to call somebody. In fact, I encourage it. Call somebody. Tell them where you are. Tell them about your heart. Ask them about their heart. And if they need to cry, let them. Let them cry. It was good enough for Jesus. It ought to be good enough for us. Would you bow with me, please? Heavenly Father, we thank you that you have built us to deal with sadness. There is sadness all the way from Genesis 3 to the 19th, 20th chapter of Revelation. It's part of this world for now. Someday it'll be different. But in the meantime, as we talked about shock last week and sorrow this week, Lord, let us admit and confess that we are sad, that we are broken. And we pray, Lord, that the season that we deal with it would be efficient and that we would heal. And that we could admit, perhaps, about past hurts that we never really healed from. Perhaps the healing begins today over sadness. Lord, we love you. We're going to get through this. And we thank you that we are not alone. God bless you. My number, 368-5473. If there's something I can do, something that I can pray with you about, we're going through this together. And it won't be long. We're going to be getting back together and laughing and smiling and crying together. God bless you.